Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth, another podcast by Dr. Lesley Phillips.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley and Corey.
Hello.
And of course, here we are on CIVL and on 101.7 FM. And as usual, today we have a fabulous topic to talk to you about, listeners. So, as you know, if you're a regular listener, that the show is all about metaphysics and spirituality, but occasionally we touch on something a little bit different and a little bit unique. Maybe we'll take a step into the paranormal.
Never going to be different today.
Yeah, and the supernatural, and so, like Corey said, today is is a little bit different, but I'm sure you're going to enjoy the show, listeners. We have a fabulous guest, and the guest is Clyde Riddlesbrood, and that's a fabulous name, isn't it? And Clyde grew up in the entertainment industry, working with his father at a dinner theatre in South Jersey. And he started his own theatre company 17 years ago, and in his career so far, he's been in 5,000 shows, and his own company has performed 1,500 shows. It's called the Riddlesbrood Touring Theater Company, and it's one of the most successful and vibrant theater companies in New York, New Jersey, and that area of the United States. And he does murder mysteries and dinner theater. And I was been reading some of the shows that they've done, and they're quite fabulous. And some of them do verge on the paranormal and the extraordinary. And Clyde has also produced some Broadway shows, and he has written a book. And the name of his book is The Greatest Brochure in the World, illustrating how storytelling can impact business for the positive. So welcome to the show, Clyde.
Hello there. Thank you so much for having me on today.
It's our absolute pleasure. And we're going to delve into your mind, plummet the depths.
A dangerous, dangerous domain, to be sure.
Yes, and we're going to take it in the direction of metaphysics and spirituality. And because you said when you wrote to us that your book deals with metaphysics and philosophy and spirituality, as well as being defiantly intellectual. So can you tell us a bit more about how it delves into spirituality, metaphysics, and philosophy, and how then that juxtaposes with the defiantly intellectual side of things?
That's quite a challenge, but I'm prepared to go there. Well, I guess if I were to put it into a nutshell, in general, just to put a bit of context into this, when I first created the book, the idea was the greatest brochure in the world was kind of a novelty, an interesting way to position ourselves as being very creative and unusual. So, lots of different companies have brochures. We wanted our brochure to be a 300-page tome that had an epic story to it that would be compelling and maybe even considered great literature to kind of differentiate ourselves from the rest. So that was the gimmickry of the book to begin with. However, once I began to write it and get deeper and deeper into it, I just couldn't help but go into, like, I guess you would call it metaphysical depths. And one of the most interesting aspects of the story concentrates on the idea that we're a theater company and we perform in front of an audience. a relatively simple thing. But in our story, the idea is that behind every audience is a creature or some type of intellect in some way. And the combined minds of the crowd during the process of a show begin to sublimate and meld into some kind of a greater consciousness, and in a way almost turn into a portal into this subconscious of these people. So to make a long story short, it's difficult to put it in a very short period of time, but during the show, the actors are able to, in a way, communicate subconsciously with the greater subconscious of the group. And then when they go to sleep that night, the things that they've learned materialize while they're sleeping. I'm not sure if I put that exactly right, but that's kind of the basis of, I guess you would call it the mystery, mystery or the magisteria of the whole epic.
Well, that's pretty cool explanation. And I believe there's definitely a truth in that audiences who are all sitting together watching the same show or listening to the same music, energetically they merge, they get on the same vibration. They do enter, like you say, a common mass merged consciousness.
Maybe like an altered state of consciousness in some way. And it also gets a lot because the actors during the show, and as an actor myself, I can attest to this, it's similar to when people are driving a car and everybody's had that experience where they all of a sudden just kind of come into themselves and say, oh my God, I've just driven for 30 minutes and I don't remember anything. That can actually happen as an actor in a show, which is strange because when you think about it, as an actor, you're moving your body, you're saying lines, you're emoting and creating characters and exchanging information with different actors. The fact that you can put yourself on autopilot and delegate yourself to do all that, yet still have a part of your mind that can remain free and be able to contemplate what you want to do for lunch tomorrow is a testament to the power of the human mind. And there's something to that in the story too, the idea that we can delegate ourselves to create a higher consciousness.
Well, that's a really interesting, and I use that example of when you're driving from A to B and you're fully conscious at point A, and then when you arrive at your destination you're conscious again, but you have no memory of what happened in between, as a way of helping people understand they're not grounded and they're not in their physical body, because you are not your body, you are spirit, and the body is a very capable vehicle. And I think that what you're touching on here, and you tell me if you agree with me, is I think sometimes what actors are doing is they're actually channeling other consciousnesses besides their own. So it may well be that some of your actors are actually leaving their body and someone else is.
Well, part of what you're describing is part of the interesting story in the book. But I definitely can tell you that, as an actor being in so many shows, you can really feel the energy of an audience. And that's why when you walk out there on stage in front of 100 people, you can feel their eyes on you. You can feel that they're focusing their mind on you, and you are the central focal point of so many human minds simultaneously. And you can feel that. As a matter of fact, you can feel it positively and negatively, because if you start to make mistakes and you mess up your words or you lose your line or you make some kind of error, you can immediately feel like you're getting hit with bullets. You feel like you're being attacked. Whereas the reverse can also be true. When you're extremely confident and your presence is powerful, it's the reverse. You feel that your force field envelops the audience and they are swimming in your personality. Mm. So it is a very spiritual experience in many ways to be a live performer, and if they want to go that far.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at magicians, whether they're in front of a group of 10 people or they're in front of hundreds of people, they use misdirection to do their tricks, of course, right? And then when you think about that, if they have an audience of several hundred people and you're doing this trick, they're like an ocean that moves simultaneously to look at this misdirection. And then, in the same with you, I liken that audience to, like, I just thought of it like an ocean that just moves and sways whatever way you need them to go. And then all of a sudden, like you say, if you're making an error, if you lose their attention, they start gabbing amongst each other and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like an ocean that's churning up and being treacherous.
And you've lost control at that point. Yeah. And
Yeah.
It's difficult to regain control and focus once they've begun bantering amongst themselves and decided to reject you. In many ways, it's kind of like a vote of no confidence to the performance once you've lost them that way.
So I have to ask you, I was reading your website, and it's very interesting, and the creation of the character Clyde was very interesting. Backstage, where you had some very eerie things happen. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I mean, this is kind of unusual to say, but believe it or not, the company in many ways was brought about. The whole idea of the name and everything was brought about by what I would consider some ghostly experiences that I've had. Some of which taking place in dreams, some of which taking place in real life, and also some taking place during very difficult personal times. And I'm sure anybody that's an entrepreneur out there can attest to the difficulties of trying to begin anything. But yes, me and my brothers and my close friends when we were kids, we used to play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and a lot of role-playing games. And in that, you really open up your imagination and get very creative, and you're creating whole worlds. You're creating characters, storylines, plots, empires warring against each other. So you're really creating a lot. And when we started the theater company, we said, you know what, let's take all that creativity that we put into that, and we'll put it into the milieu of the whole theater company. We'll make the theater company's theme the very same world that we created in this fictional universe. And that's where Clyde P. Riddlesbrood came. And but besides that, part of it is I failed at one point. I had to move back into my mother's house, which I hadn't been in as a kid, and I had to go back and live up in the attic, and I hadn't been there. And the curious thing about that was that a lot of the furniture and some of the Dungeons and Dragons things were still set up on this table because me and my brothers haven't been up in that room. We hadn't gone up in the attic. So in the story, the whole room is set as if it was just waiting for us to come back, almost like, the dice and the pencils and everything was just waiting for us to give it that breath of life that we had so long ago. And since then, I had been in the Army for many years. So when I had to move back in there, it really felt like there was something in that room with me, another presence. And I would have really crazy dreams. And the dreams were really strangely consecutive, and I would wake up and I would really feel like something was in the room. And so these experiences to me kind of came at a time in my life where I'd always been very analytical and very scientific, and not very spiritual or religious. But these experiences that I had at this time began to make me kind of feel like, probably there's something more going on here than what I thought. Maybe there's another layer to this reality that I was not aware of, but the serendipity and randomness seemed to be kind of conspiring to make me believe that there's something underneath this. So I guess that's how I would explain how I came to, I guess, the more philosophical side of looking at the world.
So how does your work, your performances and the plays that you put on, how does it open a door into that broader perception of reality for your audience?
Well, one of the things that we say to ourselves, of course, a lot of the shows that we do are all comedies. They're all intended to be fun and improvisational. And one of the things that we say to each other is, unlike another job like a plumber or a carpenter, or say somebody comes to your house and you hire them to do a job, they're just going to fix your sink or something. With us, when somebody hires us to come to their wedding or their family reunion or their company party, what they're really asking us to do is come and reprogram their minds during the period of an hour and a half so that they're happy and optimistic and positive, whereas before maybe they all were living in their own little worlds, all in their own heads. But by the end of the show, they're all united by a common experience that everyone felt like they were a part of. And they had to buy in to the show in order to allow us to inspire them. So every one of our shows is really almost like a little church service, because we have to get the audience first to buy into it, open up, and then swallow the comedy, swallow the funny things that we're going to say. And by the end, they hopefully are all in an inspired, uplifted mental state. So that's how we really feel like our shows are, in a way, a quasi-religious experience, if you really want to boil it down that way.
Well, I always say, Clyde, that I think the greatest healers on earth are the comedians, because they make us laugh. And when we laugh, our vibration goes super high and we forget our problems, we forget our worries. Even if we're feeling unwell, we don't, in the moment that we're laughing, we don't feel unwell. So,
yeah, especially if you believe in the idea of mind over matter. If you feel happy and you feel excited and you feel positive, you may very well be more positive. You may actually be healing yourself in a way, if you believe that.
Yeah. So we're having a fabulous conversation. We do have to go to a break for some advertisements right now. Listeners, you've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley and Corey. We've been talking to our guest, Clyde Riddlesbrood, about his theatre company and all things metaphysical associated with it. We'll be back after these few short messages. And of course, you're listening to us on CIVL on 101.7 FM. Welcome back, listeners. You're listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley and Corey. And if you're just tuning in, let me tell you, we have a fantastic guest on tonight. His name is Clyde Riddlesbrood. He has a touring theater company called the Riddlesbrood Touring Theater Company, and he has written a book. And the name of the book, sorry, Clyde, maybe you can say it, because I'm trying to find it on my page here.
Oh, it's called The Greatest Brochure in the World. Yes.
The greatest brochure in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love it.
Yes,
love it.
yeah. Roll up.
At least you're admitting it. Most people, I used to work for a seminar company, and you used to talk about books, and books are just very expensive brochures in most cases.
Well, you know what? I mean, the idea is everybody looks at a brochure as a piece of trash. You know what I mean? I mean, how many times are you walking into a street fair, or you're asked to pick up a brochure? Hey, can I give you this pamphlet? People just instinctively take it to avoid being impolite, but then they throw it away or don't care. So we wanted to try to turn that on its head and say, actually, the brochure is the most compelling piece of literature that you've ever seen. As a matter of fact, you must take this brochure to save yourself, right? So we really tried to add a little bit of fun into the idea of the brochure. So in the very beginning, it does talk about our shows and stuff, but then it goes into this deep adventure that people can enjoy and walk away with the mind of saying, boy, these guys are, if nothing else, extremely creative. So maybe they do a great job with my birthday party.
Yeah, what we were talking before the break was very interesting. We were talking about, I guess, changing your state on an internal level. And I studied some psychology. And psychology, it's if somebody is unhappy or sad or depressed, as opposed to finding out what's depressing them, is how are you depressed? How do you feel depressed? What is it affecting? And when you have somebody who's sad, if you can get them to stand up straight as opposed to hunched over and smile, put a smile on their face, and as opposed to fast, rapid breathing, take nice deep breaths, they're going to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
So when people come to your shows, regardless of how they feel, if you're doing your job, which is entertaining, especially in the comedic sense, if you're entertaining, then when they leave, they're not going to be the same individual as when they go into that show.
Or if they are not changed to a new individual, let's say, we can at least say that we've changed their polarity. At the very least, they're a better version of themselves, at least for a short period of time. And you hit on something that I always found pretty interesting, and the idea that simply smiling, laughing, changing your body posture, those types of things can actually change your mental state. And I definitely believe that's true, although I'm no neuroscientist or anything. But I definitely feel that when we do a show, one of the things that we do is try to get people physically involved. Sometimes we get them out of their chair. And you're right. We've noticed that in the beginning, they reject the contagiousness of the comedy at first. They tend to want to put a defensive wall around themselves and not quite laugh, not quite be into it. But if you keep the pressure on, what happens is a few of the people in the audience will start to laugh. And once they feel that it's acceptable to laugh, they begin to fall under peer pressure. Then more people laugh. It's begin to infect the audience. They all realize that it's okay to laugh. Now they're kind of more of one mind. Now they're going to be laughing. Now they're physically reacting to the show. You're right. That's going to reinforce that again. So all these factors definitely play a part in changing their mindset. And also another one is, I personally believe that when people are depressed or upset or worrying, it's mostly a sense of overreaction and exaggeration of a problem. I mean, they probably have these real problems, but because they're focusing and thinking about it over and over and over and over and over, they're making the problem take over their entire mind. Whereas if we can get them to forget about it for a while, just erase it for a while, it doesn't take away the real temporal problem, but it allows them to get more perspective and maybe see the problem for what it is, something small, something compartmentalized, something manageable.
Yeah, it's interesting. We used to, one of our seminars was a personal development seminar. What one of the things that we used to do was we put people into a sad state. We'd tell them, think of the saddest thing. Think of the thing that depresses you the most. Now go right into that feeling and go deep into that feeling. And people would cry, and because we have them under a certain amount of control by that time as well. And then we used to, in the background, we started playing a laugh track of this woman who just like you could see that she's crying. She's laughing so hard, And then we try to get people to stay in that sense of sadness, and
it's hard, probably.
And it's literally impossible to keep them in that place, because it is a contagion that is so strong and wonderful. We've talked about it in several of our shows about amusement and laughter. It's wonderful that
it's powerful, and thank God it is, because taking ourselves too seriously and our problems too seriously can really hamper your ability to get through your day, maybe even reach your goals. It's hard to keep your eyes on some aspirational goal you're trying to accomplish if all you're doing is beating yourself up all day. Oh, I did that, I got this, it's unfair, the world hates me. All that stuff is bad.
Mm-hmm.
So we do a little bit of trying to surgically remove that during our shows, and that's actually, believe it or not, one of our values that we really try to do is recognize the fact that we're just not standing up there like dancing bears, waiting to get a laugh. We feel more like on the offensive. We feel like these people need to feel happy. They need something to make them gel together for a while, and really be put into a positive mood. And that is a little bit of an aggressive thing to take that mindset, because you're not just saying, I'm going to be like a TV and dance around and sing and wait, and they just observe us. No, they're experiencing us. So it's a big difference.
Mm. So,
what are the troupe's values? I was reading very briefly on the website. Tell us a little bit about the values. Sorry, Lesley, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I mean, to be brief, I mean, some of them are. Our value system is a little bit of a dichotomy. There's some things in opposition to one another. Like one of them is staunch independence. As the actors, one of the things about us is we don't have a director. The actors are all almost like commedia dell'arte. It's very improvisational. We do have a script and we do have a framework, but it's very audience participatory. So the actors are always thinking of new jokes. They're scanning the audience, looking for someone who might look like a celebrity, or that person might have a funny hat on, or, we're always looking at ways to engage with the audience and get them out of their shell. And that means that it can't be top down. It can't be a director saying, listen, this is my vision and this is my art and these are the lines as I writ them, and so you shall say them. No, this is definitely a more organic thing where the actors are all trying to get laughs, and they're their own directors. As a matter of fact, we don't even do any blocking. We go over lines and everything, but we don't actually say where you're supposed to stand, because they mostly also often walk out into the audience. The reason why I gave that as a context is because it shows independence. We really want to have independent, brutal thinkers that are able to improv and create content on the spur of the moment. And not every actor can do that. Some actors, really, they want to be up on the stage and they want the comfort of being separate from the audience. They want the comfort of being able to be reading their lines or remembering their lines. We're asking people to create caricatures of themselves and generate content on the fly. And that's a different kind of a creative spirit that can do that.
Isn't that, I mean, really, isn't that, I think we're, in a way, we're all storytellers and we're all performers, because we're all writing and performing our own lives in the moment.
Mm-hmm. We're doing it already. It shouldn't be too hard. Yeah.
And really, we're only limited by our imagination and what we believe is possible.
Well, when you look at your players, I mean, when you look at the website, you see the pictures of the players a little bit. There's that one picture with you in front and all the players standing in a line behind you. You can actually feel that energy from them, that independence, that independent nature that you're talking about. It's actually a visual thing. You can see it, and almost even on the internet, you can almost feel, it's almost tactile. You can almost feel that independence.
Well, it's a difficult thing with any organization, because on one hand, now over the years we've tried different things. Trying to keep a theater troupe together for 17 years is not easy, and actors, especially intelligent, creative people, tend to be difficult to corral like cats. They want to go their own way. They don't want to listen to top-down direction. But on the other hand, you want those kind of creative people that can give birth to brand new things on a constant basis. So it's always a struggle between order and chaos, really. And the way we come down on that is with the framework of the theater. We have everything very, very free. As a matter of fact, a lot of the actors, there's a ranking system, and quite a few of them get like a revenue share of everything the company makes. Some of the top people in the troupe make money from that, and that's an intent to make them feel like we're all in the same boat. But it's not always easy, and not everybody sticks around forever. But between using loyalty to offset independence, using those two things has been a pretty good way for us to keep really talented people, giving them enough space to feel like they're not being oppressed, in that way. But at the same time, keeping them together so we can act as a cohesive whole to do great things and put great things together.
That's interesting, very interesting. One of our main focuses on doing our show and in the work that we both Lesley and I do is trying to get, as she alluded to before, is trying to get people in the present. And when you're in the present, that negativity of the past or the fear of the future, it's very difficult for it to take over your system. And it's the same thing. I find it's the same thing with fear. Fear is the acronym, of course, false evidence appearing real. We find that people live in a state of fear mostly, and that they walk around their lives not being there. And when they take time out of their day for their own personal pleasure, a lot of it is done almost automatically, like we were talking about earlier. Even the leisure times, like going for a walk, as opposed to enjoying nature, as opposed to enjoying the film that you're watching or the play that you're watching. A lot of people are there just thinking out in other areas. I find what you're talking about, what you're doing by involving an audience, not just expecting them to laugh when you put them on cue to laugh. I really think that is a wonderful. I mean, entertainers do that with children. You see the entertainers do that with children a lot, and children.
It's easier with children. It's easier.
Yeah, because they have no fear of doing this. They just jump right in. How do you? I know how you spoke about it a little bit earlier, but how do you get deep into an audience that you're having an issue? I mean, you're on the East Coast, and let's face it, New Yorkers. My sister lived in Jersey for a while, and yeah, and actually just outside of Philadelphia, which is like that tri-state area, and there are not, I wouldn't say harder people, but there's so much more negative activity going on in those areas. And how do you?
Well, is it faster? Some of what I'm interpreting is what you're saying is a little bit of the faster pace of life means people are just by necessity or are constantly thinking about their shopping list. They got to pick their kids up. They got to work. They got this, emails. So that kind of fast, chaotic pace of life makes it hard to take a break and just sit quietly and just meditate or think about things without distraction. I mean, it's interesting that you posit that, because in many ways I've always felt that it's kind of like a Western tradition that maybe we have, that where we're used to always thinking of things in terms of intellectualizing everything. Like we create a intellectual world that we live in, maybe even more than we live in the real world, which is probably unique to more of a Western view than an Eastern view. But, that's, I think, a good and a bad thing. But mostly everybody talks about the bad, but there's a good thing about that too, and that's that we allow ourselves to create an entire world view with its own rules and its own culture and its own mechanisms. And we live through that life, and we can almost interact with other people, even though they're in their own world. And we can all shop next to each other and go to the same ATM machine, but everybody's really all in their own little universe in a way, which I've always found interesting. But when you get them into an audience, our job is to get them out of that world for a while. And in a way, we have to impress upon them the present. Like you said, live in the present right now. And there's nothing that really makes living in the present more visceral than, I think, live performance. Because, You are there right now. And this person is doing that right now. And when I'm saying a line, if I reach over to someone at the front table and I could say, hey, how you doing there, sir? You know, that's a nice shirt you got on. They no longer have the ability to be thinking about what happened yesterday or think about tomorrow. They have me and my eyes looking right at them in front of an audience. They are on the spot. They are in the moment. So doing that over and over, picking people out of the crowd, sensing where they are, picking these sacrificial sheep around the room, that brings the whole into the present, because they have to be alert, because what if an actor goes up to them next, right? So that's the way we make sure that they're in the now.
Wonderful. Thank you. And now, unfortunately, right now, we're going to go to another break. And listeners, you're listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley and with Corey on CIVL on 101.7 FM. We'll be back in a few moments. Welcome back, listeners, to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley and with Corey. This evening on Unlocking Your Truth, which, as you know, is all about metaphysics and spirituality, we've been having a fantastic discussion with our guest, Clyde Riddlesbrood, and he runs a theatre company. But as we've been going through the conversation, I've been learning a lot about Clyde, and it seems to me like he is a master in terms of the energy of the group because he's had a lifetime of experience dealing with group energies and group dynamics and getting individuals to participate within a group, whether it is his own theatre troupe or whether it is the audience. And so, Clyde, I wanted to delve a little bit more into that aspect of group dynamics. And one question that came up in the last segment while we were talking was, you were talking about your theatre troupe being a bit like a herd of cats. And on the one hand, you want to encourage everyone in their individuality and their magnificence and their ability to express their uniqueness. And on the other hand, you're trying to create a cohesive performance. And one question I had was, and I don't think this applies just to actors, I think it applies to every sphere of life, that do you ever get people who want to be the center of attention and go into competition with the other troupe members? And how do you deal with that?
Well, that's actually encouraged. That's encouraged because at the end of the day, our shows, if you really want to think about it, usually have 4 to 5 actors, and but they're more like entertainers than actors. They're more like stand-up comedians in many ways than, Shakespearean performers. So they're out there to get attention. Actually, their ability or desire to get attention is actually one of the strongest intrinsic motivators that allow them to come up with constantly new funny things. And so we actually encourage, we even have like little jokes like, oh man, I'm going to be carrying the show on my back today. I got a couple of great jokes. You guys they're going to hate you, but they're going to love me. Like there's a lot of that. So it's kind of all in fun. But there definitely is a desire out there in the audience to see who can get the most laughs, who can, really pull someone in, really, like say somebody's in the audience and they're not quite paying attention, they're not quite in it. If you can really single them out and get them to be part of the team, that is like a great victory. So competition definitely is helpful for this.
That's cool. That's really interesting. That's a different perspective. Thank you. The other question I had about group dynamics is in the first segment you were talking about the audience and how you can viscerally feel the energy of the audience, and whether they're on board with what you're doing or whether they're being resistant to it. And it strikes me that for somebody like you, you've been doing this all your life, I understand, that you're very used to it. But for someone who's a new actor, who maybe comes to it a little bit later on without the same depth of experience, that must be quite a difficult thing for them to deal with, that whole bombardment of energy. I mean, for example, I've noticed myself, as our audience has become more and more, we can feel the difference in the energy as the audience becomes larger and larger, and there's definitely almost like a personal growth that you go through with that, dealing with that larger energy vibration. And so I wonder if you could comment a bit more on that. And then the other thing I wanted to ask is, I think that you're mainly doing live work, but maybe you've got some videos on YouTube. And the other thing that I find interesting is, because we've got the live radio show, and then we've also got the podcast, and we have thousands of people listening to our podcasts, and they can be doing it anytime when we're not engaged in doing the show live. And so then there's the additional energy of that group of people who are doing it at a different time.
Well, I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, actually, and frequently ones about search engine optimization. I learn a lot from those. But you're right. I sometimes really enjoy just sitting by myself listening to a podcast, and I really feel like I'm part of it, even though I'm not there, even though I know that it's a recording. It just seems so real, and I'm listening to it, that I really do feel like I am part of this conversation, even though I can't really interject. So I definitely know that when I listen to podcasts, you can always tell when someone is excited about what they're talking about, or somebody is just kind of mechanically going through the motions and kind of, they're doing a podcast because they feel that they're supposed to, but, so whenever I hear, like, I don't know if you ever listen to the BBC podcasts, every once in a while I listen to them, In Our Time, I think it's called, like, they're really fun to listen to. But yeah, I mean, you can tell that the guest speakers that they get on and the people that are on there, you can just tell that they're really into what they're talking about, and that makes it even more interesting to listen to. And you can feel it in the timbre of their voice.
Yeah, I almost think there's a kind of a group energy that happens outside of time and space. Like when you're doing a live performance in time and space, you've got this captive audience and the energy of that audience. But I also think that there's another type of audience that exists that has a collective energy, but outside of the time and space that you're doing the performance.
Well, I mean, we're really getting into the metaphysical stuff. I mean, I have some belief systems that not everybody else, but I mean, I do enjoy meditation. I came to it relatively late, but visualization is something that I love to do, and it helps me out. And if ever I have a challenging show coming up that I'm not sure how it's going to go, I sit and I imagine the audience in front of me, and I can even do it right now. I can imagine them. I imagine them laughing and smiling. I can feel their attention, and I usually finish it off with a big applause. They're laughing, they're having a great time, and I just let that tape run a couple times, and it's whether it has a quantum effect upon the universe, who knows, but it has an effect on me. So I practice it.
Yeah, no, you're consciously creating your reality, I believe, in doing that.
Well, I mean, that's what I really try to do. And, and I do feel that, and if anyone reads the book, they'll see that there's a lot of things about serendipity. And I'm sure a lot of people out there are like me, where they're maybe not super religious and consider themselves very intellectual, so they don't like to get into the dogma of different religious systems, because they philosophically know that they can't really be defended, but still they know that there's something there. Like there's still, and that happened to me as I got older, because it just seems that more and more things were happening. I felt like I was seeing more of a pattern in reality. Whenever I needed something would happen. Whenever I needed a new costume, a little garage sale just happened to pop up next door with just the needed item. Those kind of things began to seem like non-believable. If I were to just look at science and say probability, I no longer believed it, because it just seemed too designed. So in those respects, I believe that there's more acting on reality than most people think.
Definitely. Coming back to your costumes again, I was reading on the website where your costume was created. There was an eeriness around this was what I was leading into earlier on during the talk, how I think you were dyeing your costume, and the steam picked it up and created an image for you.
Well, that whole entire concept is both it's intended to be an allegory for the idea of dissimilar individual things coming together as one coherent thing, and that is a kind of a common theme in the story. The idea that individual, independent thinking beings can also not just have their own I, but they can also have a collective I, a group of people that are different yet consider themselves one of the same body. And in that way, the costume, which starts off as different costumes from different shows and different actors, are all dyed together and then rise up as one distinctly independent whole, losing cool. Some individuality but gaining strength.
A question. Sometimes, again, we're not really in the entertainment. We're in the infotainment business, education, and actual infotainment. With talking with people this show. But every once in a while, we get into a place where we're going to do a show or workshop, and I won't say negativity comes in, but a little bit of, I hope they like this. I hope they enjoy this topic. I hope our listeners will get into it and understand it. Do you folks ever get that type of, I guess you would call it performance anxiety?
Sure.
Worry about a certain area that you're working in, or a group of people. Like, say, you're doing a dinner theater for 90-year-old people. If they get your jokes or whatever. Honestly, believe it or not, it happens much more rarely than you would think. And I think some of it is experience. Some of it is just attitudinal, because honestly, we've done it. So many of the actors have done so many hundreds and hundreds of shows that there develops a kind of you don't care anymore about failure. You just don't care. If they like it, they like it. If they don't like it, they don't like it. So part of that is a nice protection, because if you don't care whether they're going to like it or not, you don't have that fear to struggle with. But that's only part of it. The other thing is passion. I really enjoy getting in front of an audience and getting laughs. I mean, I love it. I love it. I love coming up with new jokes and seeing the expression on people's face when you make a joke that's funny, but also just about them, and they know that you must have just created it right now. They know that it wasn't some stock joke that you stole from, Bob Hope. They know that it was a real joke that you came up because of the way they look or something. So they know it's in the present. I feel that if you
get out there and talk with passion, people are going to naturally pay attention and be more excited, because they're going to be like, oh, even if I don't care about this subject, this person is so compelling about what they're talking about that maybe it's worth my time to listen to them. So I think if you get rid of the fear and then go in with the passion, don't care about the rest. They'll follow you.
Oh, I agree. One of my favorite quotes is from Bill Clinton. And the quote is, that people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right. Well, you're right. Well, if you show that you really care about, at least about the topic, because if you don't even seem to care about what you're talking about, why should they?
Oh, definitely.
So I think that. And that's just instinctual, If somebody comes up and starts talking about a timeshare, and you can tell that they're on commission and they don't even care, they hate their job, it's like just hearing their voice and is enough for me to know that this is not for me. So you either have to be really good at lying or really passionate and love what you do.
I've been in sales most of my life, and I say a good salesman is a salesman who you can sense cares.
Right.
A great salesman is a salesman that can fake that sincerity without you knowing.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that there are people that can do that. Me personally, I think. If you could always find something that what you're selling is going to benefit them, if you can feel like you're helping them by selling it to them, you feel like there's good value in your product and the money that they're going to pay is small compared to the great reward they'll get. I think it's easy to feel moral in the idea of persuading someone. It's not hard to come up with that if you feel strongly that your product is worth it.
Persuasion doesn't work. I mean, it will work, but you'll have, more like even in your line of work, you can persuade people to be happy, to laugh in a way. But when they leave, they say, "Oh, that was like cheesy,"
Well, sometimes, but you know what? It's kind of like the old idea where people make decisions based on emotion and then validate with fact. You hear that a lot.
Yes, doesn't work.
That really is true. And if people are laughing, and if people are having a good time emotionally, they're usually they're not chewing away at the material intellectually, trying to find weaknesses or things. So they're not using that part of their mind that's critical. So if they're having a good time, it's very rare at the end of the show for them to be laughing their butt off and then say, that was great, but you know what, that was dumb. I mean,
well, that's what I'm saying. The sincerity on both parts is very critical. I mean, in sales or entertainment or self-help, or what we do is we help other people as well. Both people have to be sincere. I mean, I've had clients come to me, and I look at them, and they want to be healed of something, or they want to be fixed, but at the same time, they don't. In psychology, it's called a secondary gain, and you see it a lot in depression, where somebody doesn't, they want to be out of this depression, but they don't want to be out of the fact that their husband really cares now, and the kids are taking care of them, and their family is concerned. They keep in that state, and that's a terrible thing to see happen. So, because they can't be helped. You can't be helped until you want to help yourself. And it's the same thing with an audience. In a way, you have to be willing to open yourself up to what's coming towards you.
I think comedy bypasses that.
Yeah, it does. It does to a point.
Well, it does, because it goes beyond. It bypasses, I guess, the intellectual to some degree, because and the funny thing is with comedy is even things that sometimes people would consider to be offensive nowadays or politically incorrect, they'll usually have a two-stage reaction that gets that's always humorous to actors, because what will happen is they'll say a quote unquote dirty joke, right? And let's just assume for a minute that it's appropriate in this audience. They're okay. They're all adults, or they're there for a good time. Well, what'll happen is at first they'll laugh, and then they'll look to their left and right, and then back off the laughter because first their emotional mind heard it, saw the truth of the comedy, instinctively laughed at it. But then their higher mind read it and said, oh, this is supposed to not be funny according to whatever my social morals are, wherever I'm at. So I better pretend not to laugh. And that's part of the proof that you can see that comedy is instinctual because they feel it before they think it. And there's truth there. It's truth that you're found.
Yes. Well, thank you. And, thank you so much, Clyde, for being on the show. Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Oh.
I'm sure we could both sit here and talk to you for much longer. And I, for one, have really enjoyed having you on the show. I've actually learned a lot listening to you about all sorts of things. So thank you so much. And if our listeners wanted to find out more about you, how could they do that? And given that you're on the East Coast and we're on the West Coast, are there some places where people who aren't traveling to your area would be able to watch some videos and things?
Well, of course, we do have our YouTube. If anybody types in the word Riddlesbrood, which is very unusual, no one will find that anywhere, you'll find our YouTube channel, which has about 80 to 100 different videos on there. Small shows, big shows, medium shows. Also, we do tour. We're a touring theater company.
Oh,
so
cool.
Occasionally we do get around. So we've been in Florida. We were in Texas once. We were in North Carolina, Ohio. So we do fly every once in a while to for colleges or larger upscale events. That's not a problem at all. Also, I would definitely encourage your readers, especially if they're the intellectual type and enjoy deep reading that stimulates the mind. Take a look at our book, The Greatest Brochure in the World. I think it will definitely surprise you. And you can find that on Amazon.
Right. And your what's your website?
Sure. The website is www.riddlesbrood.com, and that's RIDDLESBROOD.com.
Thank you so much, Clyde. And listeners, you've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley and with Corey.
Yep, that's me.
That's him. And we're going to be back next week, 7 o'clock on CIVL on 101.7 FM.
Pacific Standard Time, or not Standard Time, but Pacific Time.
Pacific Time.
Yes. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to another Unlocking Your Truth podcast by Dr. Lesley Phillips. For more information, go to our website at drlesleyphillips.com. That's drlesleyphillips.com, where you can ask questions or send her an email, and there's many free gifts on there for you as well. Come back again.